planning out your piercing groupings. Coming up next on Body Piercing Basics, episode number 90. So please stick around. For those who are new to the channel, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside the lovely Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So when I talk to you about these things, I'm telling you a level of expertise that comes with being in the body piercing industry for well over 26 years. What we're going to talk about today is kind of planning out piercing groupings or projects. This could be taken on a number of different types or styles, and some of them are kind of more traditional groupings, like, for example, all the bites that go around the lip, multiple tongue piercings, multiple earlobe piercings, upper ear cartilage, helix piercings, forward helix piercings, and also genital piercings, either male or female. Some of those do come in groupings. So we're going to talk about kind of how you plan that out, and what you should discuss with your piercer beforehand, and kind of walk you through what that process should be like. First thing we're going to talk about is what you should talk about during the consultation when you initially come in and go, hey, I want to get a grouping of these piercings or this style. You should talk about, first and foremost, is your long-term goals. For example, if you're getting an ear piercing and you're planning on having 8 of them on each side, earlobe, you should discuss that with them beforehand, mainly because that's going to greatly affect the placement of each one of those piercings, and especially the first one they do. If you don't plan it out correctly, there may not be space to do those additional piercings. The second thing is they need to take a look at your anatomy and see if it's really even, if you're even able to get these groupings, if there's enough room, if it's shaped correctly, if there's enough there to support the tissue, in space, or support the piercing, and you have enough space there. Next thing is, what can your budget handle? Of course, it'd be great and wonderful if you could sit down and get 18 piercings in one sitting, but not all of us can afford that. Sometimes it works better to do a couple here and a couple there and slowly spread that out, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The next thing you want to talk about is what your body can tolerate. Every time you do an additional piercing, every time you have another open wound on your body, every time you have an open portal that things like microorganisms and et cetera can work their way into, your body has to work a little bit harder. It only has a finite amount of resources. So the more piercings you're healing at one time, there is a possibility that it will slowly decrease your body's speed of healing and its immune system. So you really have to consider what can you handle and what you can't handle. The next one is what your pain experience is like. If this is your first piercing and you're getting, you want to sit down and do 3 forward helix piercings, it may not be the best choice for you. Yeah, you have enough going on in your mental state, worrying about the piercing, worrying about what the experience is going to be like, and it's just going to amplify everything. However, if you're kind of an old hat at it, or maybe you've had one of those lives where you're healing something, it seems like your entire childhood, in teen years, you might have a higher experience with dealing with pain. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about pain experience. So if you are new to this and you're new to this type of pain or new to pain in general, it might be a better idea to kind of take this in baby steps instead of just going all whole hog right off the bat. Next thing you want to consider is what type of jewelry is your end goal. What do you want to wear in that particular piercing or set of piercings? What do you want that to look like? Usually when piercing, we try to kind of stick with more simplistic jewelry than really elaborate stuff, mainly for a couple different reasons. The first one being is that A lot of dirt and et cetera can collect in there, or other contaminants in those really ornate designs. The other problem is they usually tend to be a little heavier, so that could prolong your healing period and cause additional issues. The third thing being is that some of those have like kind of sharp edges and points to them, so they get caught on things more readily. So sometimes it's easier just to stick with kind of very basic, yet elegant. It can be basic and elegant at the same time. And then later on, replace that with something a little bit more complex. So what is your end goal? How big are those settings going to be, etc.? This is especially important with things like ear piercings, earlobes, upper ear cartilage, etc. If you plan on wearing like, grandma's 3-carat diamond posts in the front, and you pierce those piercings too close together, you're going to be in a situation where you can only keep that front hole open. The one behind it, you just can't fit anything in. So you need to consider where your end goal is going to be eventually. So this is kind of the pros and cons part of this. Pierce all at once, or one at a time, or more stagnated over a long period of time. Let's start out with all at once. The advantage of getting them all done at once is you get it over with. You don't have to worry about doing them in the future. And you're only going through that healing process one time. You're not going through the healing process and getting another one, and then going through the healing process and getting another one. It's all done in one kind of complete set. The second advantage would be, or in the pro column for all at once, would be that sometimes, not always, but sometimes it's easier to get those piercings to match if you do them all at one time. This is not always the case, thanks to the fact that your body sometimes migrates or moves jewelry around, but sometimes it's easier to get them to match if you do them both at the same time or multiple at the same time. One of the disadvantages of doing them all at once is that any piercing, I don't care what it is, you do the first one, yeah, it hurts, but it didn't hurt that bad. It was, tolerable, etc. You do the second one, it hurts a little bit more. Then you do the third one, and that really hurts, and etc. And it just seems like the experience gets worse the more you do. I've always explained it this way. The first time you do the piercing, your body's going, hey, you should probably do something about this. This is something to be concerned about. The second time it goes, you really need to be concerned about this. And the third time it's going, hey, there's something wrong and you need to do something about it. So often how your body registers that pain will increase the more piercings you do in one setting. You need to consider that before you sit down for like 5 piercings in a row, whether or not you really want to go through that, or would you like to spread that out and do it over a longer period of time and kind of spread out that experience. Last one, and this is the advantage column for doing them all at once. Often, most places will offer a kind of discount if you do multiple piercings in one sitting. The main reason being is that they only have to do one setup. They're not dealing with having to tear down and set up and tear down and set up. So it takes less time and it takes less materials. This is not always the case. And sometimes, to be honest with you, the discount for 2 over just having 1 is so minimal that it really doesn't make any difference. Now let's talk about doing one at a time, or spreading them out over a period of time, or doing it in stages. It doesn't seem to strain the body's immune system or its ability to heal as much. It gives your body more time and more resources to heal that piercing easily and quickly if you only have a couple healing opposed to 15 of them healing at one time. A disadvantage. This usually means that if you're doing a grouping, you're going to have a much longer healing period. Because if you figure you're doing, like, I keep going back to earlobes, but it's an easy example. So you do the first set of earlobes, and that takes about 2 to 3 months to heal. Then you do the second, that's 2 to 3 more months to heal. You do the third, that's 2 to 3 more months to heal. And it just makes this into a year-long project that may have been overdone and healed within a 6-month period or even less. So it does prolong everything, and it does take more of a commitment. It is going to impact your life a lot more from the standpoint of there are certain activities like swimming that you're unable to do while piercing is healing. So take that into account also. Another advantage is the cost of getting all these piercings is spread out over a period of time. Depending on your budget, it might be easier for you to pay this much this month, and then 3 months from now pay that again, and then 3 months pay it again. Even though, like I mentioned earlier, that often studios will offer a discount to do multiples at one time, it's kind of a big pay up front. It's kind of the difference between buying a car with cash and buying a car over a 12-month period in small payments. The last one, and it's an advantage, is it gives you more time to kind of build your pain experience and kind of forget about that pain and anxiety, etc., when you get that second, third, fourth piercing done. And because it's spread out, you're not having that multiplication of impact with it hurting more as you do more in one sitting. So it usually makes the experience a little bit better. Now let's talk about the piercing itself, some of the things that should happen. The first thing is if you're doing a grouping of piercings, ask your piercer to mark out each one of those additional piercings. That gives you an idea of, even though they're not going to do all of them that day, it gives you an idea of what that placement's going to be like, gives you an idea of how that's going to fit into your anatomy and what's going to work or not work. Also, it gives you an idea to look at it and go, oh yeah, that jewelry should fit into that spot, and I think that's going to work. If you don't do that, often the first placement will dictate wherever the other ones are going to be. Back to lobe piercings. If you do it dead center of the first one and there's not enough room to do one in front and there's not enough room to do one in behind, then you're kind of stuck with just doing them behind. And that may not be the outcome that you like because it's going to look different. Second thing is your piercer should make sure that you have the anatomy to do multiple piercings in. They should make that decision right when they do the first one. Forward helixes are really prone to this, meaning that often we can do the bottom 2, but people want those 30, and when you get to the top, either that ledge of the helix is either too far out or too small, or it's curved outward, so it will not look correct. It's important to discuss that right at the beginning to understand what your body's anatomy is going to allow. Number 3, you do want those multiple markings to make sure that they're evenly spaced. Of course, when you come back and they do the second or third, if they don't do them all in one sitting, it's going to be different slightly, possibly, but you need to build off that initial idea of how much room there is and how that space is divided up. So make sure when you look at it that it looks like it's evenly spaced and there's enough room. And that brings us back to jewelry style. Like I said earlier, if you're going to wear large gym settings and etc., it's important to make sure that when you see those markings, there is definitely enough space there. You should discuss that with your piercer. Also, when they mark it, if they think that, that 5 millimeter wide piece is going to fit there. Or if you're going to be able to wear one of them or two of them, are you going to need to kind of downsize the other placements to fit it in there? Once you've gone through that whole process, you need to pick out which one you want to get done first. I'm using the ear piercings again for an example because let's say you don't have anything on your earlobes and you plan on doing 3 of them. Sometimes doing the middle one opposed to doing the one in the front looks better because it's more diddly centered to your ear. So it gives you that opportunity that if you're not going to do it all in one sitting, that you do the first one and it's going to look fine until you have time to do the other 2 instead of having this one that just looks oddly far forward. The next thing is if you're going to be doing this over in stages, is you need to figure out exactly how much time you're going to need between each piercing. You want to get it to the point where that tissue is generated kind of back to normal as much as possible. The trauma of the piercing, the initial first piercing has faded enough that you're not going to have issues with swelling affecting how those additional piercings are placed. And this is another thing we don't often talk about. When you do multiple piercings in one session, sometimes when you get to that third piercing, there is so much inflammation right off the bat that it will cause one of those piercings to be off a little bit. If you're doing a pattern or design, something like the multiple like a cross piercing with a big one in the center and then two small ones above, below, and on each side, or doing the flower design with maybe 5 smaller pieces and then a large piece in the center, make sure that when they're marking it, that pattern looks like it's right. It should visually look right, not so much get out the measuring tape and measure it out. It should have that visual look that it matches what you envision in your head. It's why it's very important that they mark everything when they start. Don't mark one, then redo it, and etc. Granted, as that piercing heals, if you're doing it in stages, again, they may shift or move a little bit, and they will probably have to adjust that pattern a little bit. Like if you're doing a pattern on the top of your ear, I would generally suggest start with whatever's going to be the center piece and then work outward, because it's going to be easier to kind of line those up to fit. Now, if you're going to be doing multiples, I would suggest doing the ones on the outside later. Also, be really aware that if you are doing a pattern like that often the middle may look centered and great, but because of the inflammation, if you do those additional piercings right away and it's swollen, they may be off. Their angle might be off, their placement may be off, and that's caused by the inflammation. So possibly doing it in stages is going to be a much better option, and you need to discuss that with your piercer. And that brings us down to the last thing I have to say on this. Oftentimes, regardless of how well a piercing is placed, no matter how correct the jewelry is, no matter how well you take care of the piercing, no matter what you do, your body at one point or for one reason or another will shift or move the placement slightly. And sometimes that'll move out of alignment or it'll move more into alignment. You don't know that. So you should be prepared for that possibility, and you should probably talk to your piercer about what do I do if that happens, and what's going to be our options, especially if you're doing something very, it's a huge piece with multiple moving parts and number of different piercings that are all supposed to be in alignment, match, and etc. That how are we going to adjust that as we move forward? Because sometimes, no matter what, you can't control it doing that. Well, that's all I have to say about planning out and doing groupings, piercing groupings. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, and useful. If so, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you liked it, because I like it when you like it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you're notified every single time we post something. Also, if you learned something or you have a question or you'd like to add to the conversation, please leave a comment. I usually answer them if I have time. If you like merch, you like t-shirts, you like throw pillows, you need a new hoodie, maybe you like the fanny packs, they're really handy. Check out our merch store. Link is in the description. There's also one of those merch bars. Till next time, here's hoping all your piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, hope you see if your body piercing needs in the future. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a good day, and we'll see you soon. If you believe.